Imagine a sword that was buried for 2,500 years. Yet when archaeologists pulled it from the tomb, the blade was still sharp enough to cut paper. Not rusted, not degraded, still deadly. But the world of ancient burial chambers holds far more than preserved blades. Deep within sealed tombs, archaeologists have discovered weapons so advanced, so unexplainable, that they've rewritten everything we thought we knew about ancient warfare. Some were found clutched in the hands of warriors who refused to let go, even in death. Others were deliberately hidden, as if their power was too dangerous to leave in the open. Today, we'll uncover 5 of the most mysterious weapons ever found in tombs, each one more impossible than the last. And the first one? It defies the very laws of metallurgy. Weapon 1. The Sword of Gojian. In 1965, Chinese archaeologists opened a tomb that had been sealed for over 2 millennia. What they found inside would challenge modern science. A sword, bronze, ornately decorated. But here's what made them stop breathing. When they removed it from its wooden scabbard, the blade gleamed like it had been forged yesterday. One archaeologist tested the edge. It sliced through a stack of 20 sheets of paper in a single stroke. After 2,500 years underground, in a flooded tomb. This is the Sword of Gojian, and it should not exist in this condition. Bronze oxidizes. It corrodes. Every metallurgist will tell you that after even a few centuries, a bronze blade should be a green, crumbling relic. But this sword looked ready for battle. Scientists ran tests. The blade contained trace amounts of sulfur and copper sulfide, a composition that essentially created a protective layer preventing corrosion. But here's the twist. This anti-corrosion technique wasn't discovered by modern science until the 20th century. So how did ancient Chinese swordsmiths, over 2,400 years ago, develop a preservation method we only recently understood? The inscription on the blade reads, "King of Yu made this sword for his personal use." King Gojian was a legendary ruler who spent 20 years plotting revenge against his enemies. 20 years of patient, calculated fury. And this sword, his personal weapon, was apparently too precious to let decay claim it. But the mystery deepens. The sword's balance is perfect. Modern bladesmiths who've examined it say the weight distribution is flawless, something that takes decades of experience to achieve. Yet records suggest this sword was made early in Gojian's reign, when he was still a young king. Who forged it? Was there a master swordsmith whose name was lost to history? Or did Gojian's court possess knowledge that vanished with his dynasty? The sword raises another question. If they could preserve bronze like this, what else could they do? And that question leads us to our next weapon. One that was found in a tomb but doesn't match any culture's known metalworking capabilities. Weapon 2. The Damascus steel blade of the Crusader tomb. In 1851, workers renovating a chapel in Sidon, Lebanon, broke through a hidden chamber. Inside was a stone sarcophagus. And inside that, a knight, still in full armor. And in his skeletal hand, a sword with a pattern on the blade that shouldn't exist in a Christian crusader's tomb. Damascus steel. The blade rippled with distinctive watery patterns, the signature of true Damascus steel, one of history's most legendary materials. But here's the problem. Damascus steel was the closely guarded secret of Islamic swordsmiths. Crusaders fought against armies wielding these blades. They feared them. Chroniclers wrote of Damascus swords that could slice through European armor like cloth. So why was a crusader buried with one? The blade was analyzed in 2003 using electron microscopy. The results stunned materials scientists. The steel contained carbon nanotubes, cylindrical molecules at the nanoscale that enhance strength and sharpness. These nanotubes weren't discovered until 1991. Medieval Islamic smiths were accidentally working with nanotechnology. But the sword in this tomb tells a stranger story. Chemical analysis revealed it was likely forged in Damascus around 1190 AD, during the height of the Third Crusade. The knight died around the same period, based on the armor style and tomb construction. This means the knight somehow acquired an enemy's prized weapon and valued it so much, he wanted it buried with him for eternity. Was it a trophy from a great battle? A gift from a Saracen opponent who honored him? Or something darker, Was it taken from a friend, a fellow crusader who'd converted? We'll never know his name. The tomb had no inscription. Just the knight, his armor, and a sword that represented the pinnacle of a rival civilization's technology. But there's another mystery buried within this discovery. When researchers examined the sword more closely, they found something etched along the fuller, the groove running down the blade's center. Arabic script, partially worn away, but still readable. It was a prayer, but not an Islamic prayer. It was a Christian prayer, written in Arabic. Someone had modified this sword. Someone who existed between two worlds, speaking both languages, praying to the same God in different words. The sword itself had become a bridge between civilizations at war. And that raises a haunting question. How many other warriors carried weapons that told stories their own armies would have considered treason? Now, if a crusader could treasure an Islamic blade, imagine what we'd find in the tomb of someone who never played by anyone's rules. Someone whose burial was so feared, they sealed her weapon away with curses. Weapon 3. The Jade Dagger of Lady Fu Hao. 1976, Anyang, China. Archaeologists discovered an untouched tomb, rare, because grave robbers had looted nearly every significant burial in China over thousands of years. But this one was different. It was hidden, deliberately obscured, as if someone wanted it forgotten. Inside was Lady Fu Hao, a military general and high priestess who lived 3,200 years ago. And surrounding her body were over 130 weapons. Bronze axes, spearheads, battle-worn blades. But one weapon stood apart. A dagger carved entirely from jade. Now, jade is ceremonial. It's for ritual, for status. It's not for war. Jade is beautiful but brittle, terrible for actual combat. You might as well fight with a glass sword. But this dagger showed edge damage. Microscopic analysis revealed impact marks consistent with striking bone and armor. This decorative weapon had been used in real battle. Think about that. Lady Fu Hao, leading troops into combat, wielding a weapon that could shatter in her hand. Why? Ancient Chinese texts describe jade as having spiritual power. They believed it could ward off evil spirits and carry the soul into the afterlife. Warriors sometimes wore jade amulets for protection. But using a jade weapon in actual combat? That's something else entirely. Unless Fu Hao believed something we don't. Oracle bone inscriptions, ancient Chinese divination texts, mention Fu Hao by name. She led 13,000 soldiers. She fought in at least 4 major military campaigns. She was so formidable that the king trusted her to lead armies while he stayed behind. But the inscriptions also describe her as performing rituals before battle. Divinations. Sacrifices. What if the jade dagger wasn't just a weapon against human enemies? What if she believed she was fighting something else on that battlefield? Shamanic traditions across ancient cultures speak of spiritual warfare, battles fought on both physical and supernatural planes simultaneously. Fu Hao was a high priestess. She communed with ancestors. She made offerings to spirits that supposedly influenced the outcomes of wars. The jade dagger might have been her weapon against threats her soldiers couldn't even see. And here's what's chilling. When archaeologists examined the tomb, they found the jade dagger positioned differently than all the bronze weapons. The bronze blades were arranged around her, pointing outward, as if defending her in death. But the jade dagger was placed on her chest, pointing toward her heart. Was it protection? Or was it a stake? Something to keep whatever power she wielded from escaping her tomb? The inscriptions stopped mentioning Fu Hao suddenly. No record of her death. She simply vanishes from history. And then, her tomb was hidden, buried beneath a new construction, deliberately obscured. It's as if they wanted to make sure she, and whatever she represented, stayed buried. But before moving on, I would like to ask you for something. If you like these documentaries and want to support me, please consider subscribing. It's free. Now, if Fu Hao's jade weapon makes you question what these ancient warriors were really fighting, wait until you see what was buried with a warrior whose weapon is so bizarre. Scientists still can't explain how it was made. Weapon 4. The Meteoric Iron Dagger of Tutankhamun. November 4, 1922. Howard Carter peered through a small hole into Tutankhamun's burial chamber. When asked what he saw, he replied, "Wonderful things." Among those wonderful things was a dagger, resting on the boy king's thigh, still in its golden sheath. When they removed it, the blade gleamed with a strange, almost otherworldly quality. It was made from iron, in an age of bronze. The Bronze Age was called that for a reason. Iron metallurgy hadn't been mastered in Egypt in 1300 BC. Iron weapons were so rare they were worth more than gold. And yet here was Tutankhamun, buried with an iron blade. For decades, Egyptologists debated its origin. Was it a gift from the Hittites, who were beginning to work iron in Anatolia? Was it traded from some distant land? Then in 2016, scientists used X-ray fluorescence to analyze the blade's composition. The results were stunning. The iron contained 10.8% nickel and trace amounts of cobalt. That's the exact signature of meteoric iron. The dagger wasn't forged from ore. It was forged from a meteorite. Someone in ancient Egypt took a piece of a fallen star and turned it into a weapon. They heated space metal, hammered it, shaped it, and gave it to a king. But here's what makes this truly mysterious. Working meteoric iron is harder than working terrestrial iron. Meteoric iron contains nickel, which raises the melting point and makes it incredibly difficult to forge. You need higher temperatures, specialized techniques, and tremendous skill. Ancient Egyptian metalworkers were masters of gold, copper, and bronze. But this was something else. This required knowledge that supposedly didn't exist in Egypt at that time. So who made it? Analysis of the blade's structure revealed it was forged, not just hammered cold. Someone had achieved temperatures high enough to actually smelt and shape the meteoric iron. That requires furnaces and techniques that Egypt wouldn't supposedly develop for centuries. And there's another detail that historians find unsettling. In ancient Egyptian, the hieroglyph for iron translates to metal from the sky. They knew. They understood that iron came from meteorites before they learned to smelt it from ore. But how? Unless they were watching the skies more carefully than we thought. Unless they tracked meteorite falls, recovered them, and studied them with a level of astronomical precision we've underestimated. The ancient Egyptians built structures aligned to stars. They tracked celestial events with uncanny accuracy. What if they also catalogued meteorite impacts? What if there were sky metal hunters whose entire purpose was to recover fallen stars for the pharaohs? Tutankhamun was 9 years old when he became king. He died at 18. In his short reign, whoever ruled in his name ensured he'd be buried with a weapon forged from the heavens themselves. A weapon from beyond Earth. Touching it means touching a material that traveled through the cosmos, survived atmospheric entry, and was claimed by humans who saw it as a gift from the gods. The dagger suggests something profound. Ancient Egyptians didn't just look at the stars and wonder. They reached up and claimed them. But if a weapon from the sky feels impossible, our final tomb weapon is so advanced, so inexplicable, that it sparked theories of lost civilizations and technology that vanished without a trace. Weapon 5. The gearbow of the Qin tomb. In 1974, farmers digging a well near Lebanon, China, struck something hard. Terracotta. What they'd found was the tomb complex of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, guarded by an army of 8,000 life-sized terracotta warriors. But it wasn't the clay soldiers that shocked weapons experts. It was what some of them were holding. Crossbows. Bronze triggers. But these weren't simple bows. When archaeologists began excavating the trigger mechanisms, they discovered something that shouldn't exist in 210 BC. Precision-engineered parts that were *interchangeable star. Let that sink in. Interchangeable parts, the foundation of mass production, weren't invented until the Industrial Revolution, over 2,000 years later. Yet here were crossbow triggers where any part could fit any crossbow. Parts manufactured to tolerances of less than a millimeter. How? The Chinese called these weapons Lian Nu, repeating crossbows. But the mechanisms found in the Qin tomb were more sophisticated than anything we'd previously discovered from that era. Some triggers showed evidence of a gear system that would have allowed rapid reloading. But when researchers tried to find the actual bow mechanisms, the wood and sinew that would have completed these weapons, they found something strange. They were gone, completely decomposed. But the bronze trigger mechanisms remained in firing position, as if still attached to invisible bows. And the positioning suggested these crossbows had a draw weight far exceeding what a human could pull manually. They must have been mechanical, gear-assisted, compound weapons that used leverage to achieve draw weights powerful enough to penetrate armor at 200 meters. But if the gears existed, where are they? Some archaeologists believe the gear systems were made from wood or other organic materials that completely degraded. Others think they were deliberately removed before burial, as if the technology was too valuable to leave in a tomb. There's a darker theory. What if the gearbow mechanisms were made from a material we haven't identified? What if we're looking at the remnants of something and not recognizing it because we're not looking for the right thing? Ancient Chinese texts mention thunder arrows and flying fire. Most historians dismiss these as poetic exaggerations. But what if some of these descriptions were literal? What if the Qin dynasty had developed weapons technology that was deliberately destroyed or hidden after the empire fell? Qin Shi Huang unified China through brutal military conquest. His armies were unstoppable. Then, just 15 years after his death, the dynasty collapsed. Rebellions, uprisings, the total destruction of his capital. What if part of that destruction was intentional? What if the people who overthrew the Qin dynasty made sure certain weapons never fell into anyone else's hands? The Terracotta Army stands as a guardian force, frozen in battle formation, holding weapons that barely make sense for their time. And beneath them, still sealed, is the emperor's actual burial chamber. A massive underground palace that remains unexcavated, reportedly rigged with poison traps and rivers of mercury. Ground-penetrating radar has confirmed the mercury rivers. They're real. Liquid metal, still flowing after 2,200 years. What else is down there? The crossbow triggers we've found are sophisticated enough to make modern engineers pause. But they're just the weapons given to clay soldiers, the outer guard. The Real Tomb Guard, the human warriors who were buried alive to serve the emperor in death, would have been entrusted with his finest weapons. No one has opened that central chamber. No one has seen what Qin Shi Huang took to his grave. But based on what we've found in the outer sections, some archaeologists believe we're not ready for what's inside. Not technologically, not conceptually. Because if the guard is this advanced, what did the emperor himself wield? And here's the final mystery. Ancient historians record that before Qin Shi Huang died, he became obsessed with immortality. He sent expeditions to find the elixir of life. He consumed mercury, believing it would preserve him forever. What if some of his weapons weren't meant for human enemies? What if, in his desperation to live forever, he believed he'd be fighting something after death? Some force in the afterlife that required weapons unlike anything on Earth. The gearbow remains a ghost weapon. We have the trigger. We have the evidence it existed. But the full mechanism remains invisible, decomposed into dust, leaving only questions. Questions that may only be answered when, or if, we ever open that central tomb. 5 tombs. 5 weapons. Each one impossible in its own way. A sword that refuses to corrode. A blade that contains nanotechnology centuries before its discovery. A jade dagger used in spiritual warfare. A dagger forged from a fallen star. And a ghost weapon whose true mechanism remains invisible. These aren't just artifacts. They're evidence that the people who came before us were capable of things we're only beginning to understand. That knowledge was lost. That some technologies rose and fell and vanished, leaving only these tantalizing fragments behind. And somewhere, in tombs we haven't found yet, lie weapons even stranger, waiting. If you want to see more mysteries unearthed, subscribe. There's so much more buried in history, and we're just beginning to dig.